Okay, this is part of the evening where we're going to do the hustings for the next elections. We're all looking forward to the next elections and getting this government out. We've got Tim, who would like to stand for Chichester, and so I'm going to pass you over to Tim.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone. My name is Tim Young. I grew up in the village of Cocking, and I've lived in the Chichester area all my life. I now live in Esbourne village with my wife and 2 children. I'm happiest when I'm outdoors walking, running or mountain biking on the South Downs. The climate crisis and the realization that the mainstream parties would never take meaningful action spurred me to get actively involved in green politics. I read politics at university. My career has been in sales, and my job is selling solar energy projects for manufacturing businesses. So I speak confidently about climate change, energy policy, and how the green industrial revolution will work in practice. It is now realistic, likely even, that the Tories will lose the 2024 election. Anything would be better than this Tory government, but how different and how green would a Labour government be? We need Greens in Parliament to put climate action at the top of the agenda, and I have the tenacity to ensure that happens. I will fight for green solutions like carbon tax, universal basic income and home insulation, and make sure these have priority over Labour special interests. Are the people of Chichester ready for a Green MP? And what sort of candidate would they vote for? In January 21, I volunteered to be a paper candidate for the county council elections. I bought myself a green rosette and started knocking on doors. I love campaigning and built up some momentum. As time went on, more and more people I'd spoken to had heard about the Green Party candidate. My hard work paid off, and I came second to the Tory candidate with 650 votes, more than Labour and Liberal Democrats combined. 20% of those who voted Green. So for a county council election, I got 650 people across a rural area to vote Green. We'd never had a Green candidate, so these were first-time Green voters. That's without a single flyer or poster, in a Tory heartland with just me going door to door. When I say door to door, I mean it. I didn't have a register of voters. And that may have been an advantage. If we expect the same people to vote, then expect the same results. I reached out to different voters and got a different result. This year, I was elected as district councillor in the Chichester South Ward with 950 votes. As a district councillor, I'm on the environment panel. I was inspired by Carla Denya's action on Bristol Council to declare a climate emergency. In my first meeting on the new council, I proposed that the council should write to our MPs in support of Caroline Lucas's climate and ecology bill. I worked to persuade members from all parties, and the motion was unanimously carried. The skills I've demonstrated whilst campaigning are transferable to the role of a Green MP. I will always be campaigning, persuading, influencing. But my real point of difference is that I have demonstrated that I can get people to turn out and vote for me. Vote Green in an election. Vote for a fairer, greener country. That is what I can deliver. Now you know more about my background and my reasons for wanting to be the Green parliamentary candidate for Chichester. I hope I'll have your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. And for Arun, our candidate is Carrol Birch.
Thank you. I haven't written such a good speech as Tim, but I have got some experience of having done it before when I stood in the 2019 general election. and I discovered that the manifesto the Green Party had written was absolutely brilliant. And if only more of us had won, we would be in a much better state than we are now. Sadly, we didn't win. So what are we working on now in the Green Party? We're working towards getting some MPs into government and getting as many votes as possible across the country from the candidates that stand. I've got lots of experience from my housing background of understanding the issues the country's facing. I also have really serious concerns about climate change and can understand what's happening in the world from my horticultural background and the biodiversity disaster that we're seeing across the world and how it's affecting our children's future, which is being threatened dramatically at the moment when we look at the temperatures across the world and we're seeing the changes in the weather patterns. Really, this election is going to be absolutely the last chance we've got to try and save a future in this country. And that's on the climate and biodiversity emergency. If we look at socially where we are, we've got a government that has completely dismantled much of what we need to run a civilised country in the UK. They've been dismantling the NHS by promoting privatisation through the back door. I've got serious concerns about Labour because many of them seem to have taken money from the private health companies, and the government is making rules that means the NHS has had to give much of its money and its budget to private health companies and building them up. Our schools are moving children further and further away from nature. Many of them no longer encounter nature in their lives. They're just in concrete playgrounds, often housed in flats, with very limited access to playgrounds. And I have noticed a lot of playgrounds are now quite plastic. There isn't even grass in many of the playgrounds. So how are our children going to understand nature to try and preserve it? So when I'm going to stand for you in Bognor and Littlehampton, it's going to be to argue with the candidates who are standing, putting forward what we need to do to preserve our world for the future and to gain as many green votes as possible to support the Green MPs that hopefully will be elected. I've been elected as an Arun District Councillor and I'm now Chair of the Housing and Wellbeing. And one of the Green Party policies I'm really keen on is the right house in the right place for the right price. Because this is what's limiting so many people's future, is that they can't find a home, or if they do, it's an extremely expensive home. We could have insulated all the homes that we've been building across the country. We could have been using much less energy right now as a country if we'd had really good policies in place. There's so much to do. In fact, just about everything you look at in the UK now needs to be brought back to where it should be and move forwards to a better place for our future. So I hope you'll vote for me just so I can stand and be the Green voice in Bognor and Littlehampton. Thank you. Are we doing questions? Are we doing questions?
Yeah. Right. Has anybody got a question for any of the candidates?
Do you want to come and sit here, Tim? So that'll make more sense if you sat over here as well.
Right. Yes, Holly, what's your question?
Yeah, it's to both candidates. Thank you very much. And it's really to ask, because of the trajectory that we are on, not just nationally, internationally, globally, etc., how the candidates will address the issue of resilience and adaptation. Because as we move forward, I don't know if anyone saw Panorama on Monday night. I didn't know. Did anyone watch it? It was bloody depressing. Seriously horrible. Sorry for the language. Excuse me. You can catch it on BBC Sounds, because everything that the BBC put out is on Sounds. If you want to be depressed, go and watch. No, seriously. It's about how the fossil fuel companies globally are ramping it up like there's a million other planets out there that we can go and inhabit. Seriously. So if you're realistic about this stuff, you have to get your head around going forward. Issues around resilience and adaptation are going to be at the top of the agenda at some point in the next decade if we get another decade. So I'd just like to ask both candidates how you would approach the issue of R&A.
Thank you. Can I ask Tim to answer first and then Carol? Is that okay? And then the next question the other way around.
It's a super question, and it's particularly relevant here in Chichester, where we're a low-lying coastal community. So it's particularly relevant here, and it's something we should be mentioning in our campaign. When we had the climate change hustings in Hunston, when I talked about flooding and other candidates talked about CO2 emissions, it was the flooding that really struck a chord with the members of the audience. So I think it's particularly relevant, and as I say, particularly relevant here in Chichester.
Thank you. So what are we going to do about it? Sorry. So we've focused a lot on CO2 and CO2 emissions, but in fact what we really need to focus on is reducing our energy use, because every single form of energy production is still using CO2 in its production. Even the most renewable energy still does so. So we really need to just focus on reducing the amount of energy we need as a society to live. So that means insulating properties. It also means getting really good town planning, which has been completely absent, because we need to be developing communities where people can walk and cycle, get to school, get to work, get to the shops, get to the train station, don't need cars. All the things that we need energy for, we need to reduce the energy. But Tim's absolutely right. The sea level is rising. We are in a very low-lying area in Bognor and Littlehampton. We need to seriously look at how we get the water off the land. We know it's possible because we know what Holland does. You can set it up so that we can get all this water from increased sudden rainfall at the same time as the sea rising. We just need to have pumps and outlets in the right place and the right drainage systems. So that's another bit of resilience we need to do. We also need to do as much as we can to improve the biodiversity, because every bit of greenery we've got is actually removing CO2. But there's a massive amount of CO2 to be removed. We need to educate people, because if people understand how much CO2 is being produced every time, for example, they drive their car, actually it's a huge amount of CO2, but it's also taken a huge amount of trees, etc., to actually produce 1 gallon, or 1 litre, I should say, of petrol. And also we need to really look at whether electric cars are really going to provide a long-term solution, because many people believe by moving to electric car they sort of solve the problem, but actually we should be using vehicles much less in our personal lives, maybe looking at shared cars or giving up cars altogether. So, but that means you have to have the right structures in place to do that. So there is a huge amount of work we can do to build resilience. We also do need to look at our food chains, because I think they are in danger, and we need to preserve as much as possible of our woodlands and our natural biodiversity, peatlands, all those carbon capture areas that are naturally capturing carbon. At the moment, we are such a long way from that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, Georgie.
So nationally, the party is focused on winning 4 seats and really keen to get all activists to those areas to focus on those seats. So I'm interested in your opinion, given that we don't have many boots on the ground in our area, what your opinion is on whether we should be going to Brighton to hold Brighton Pavilion or working for you guys to get as many green votes in our area here.
Thank you. Brilliant question. Because actually, that's absolutely right. That is what the focus is for the Green Party, to ensure that we do get a reasonable group of MPs into government. So from my point of view, I'm looking at standing to be the voice, to go to all the hustings, which I really enjoyed last time. But this time I'll have even more experience and understand how to challenge some of these people a bit more. So my idea for myself is that should I be selected, I'll ask a small number of people, maybe 3 or 4 people, to support me in that role, and suggest that everybody else should go to Brighton or wherever they want to, which candidate they want to support. Because actually you could tour the country, going around, exploring different parts of the country and helping some of the other candidates. Cycle and train, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Yes, you're absolutely right. We need to support the candidates with the best chance of winning their seats, of course. Remember, though, that the famous phrase, "a week is a long time in politics." Our MP was, and probably still is, the most unpopular woman in Britain. And her majority, she won 35,000 seats at the last election. The Liberal Democrats won 14,000, Labour won 9,000, we won 2,500. However, things can change incredibly quickly. In the Chichester area, I don't think Conservatives will vote Lib Dem, but my experience is that they will vote Green. So I think we can win a lot of seats from the Conservatives, and we've seen with recent policies, the popularity of recent Green policies, we see a lot. I see a lot on social media, people saying, Labour had my vote, now I'm giving it to the Greens. So if we can make Chichester a 3-horse race, then why not?
Philip.
Yeah, you talked about resilience. I'm not altogether sure that people on the door really would get the hang of that. It's more a question of what future do we want, and vote for the planet.
Oh, thanks, Philip. I think I'd be really interested to talk to you about that further. My experience is the other way round, that people recognise local flooding, but may struggle to think of it in a global context, or may find that hard to get their head around. So when you talk to local people, tell them that you've lived locally, tell them that you remember the flooding of 1993, flooding again in 2000. I think people recognise that and remember it, and then point out the amount of development that we've had since then point out the 0.5 degree of global warming that we've had since then I think that really hits home. And you know, people are particularly passionate. People will be particularly concerned about flooding in their own area, perhaps before they wake up to the global problem.
Yeah, that's true. Just that it needs some hope as well.
Well, that is true.
Yep, thank you. I'd agree with much of what Tim's just said. It is a difficult situation. Many people are waking up to the seriousness of the situation. So it is offering them an alternative that's more hopeful, that's trying to ensure there is a future for everybody. So that's, I think, where we've got to go.
Interestingly, if I might add, Philip, one interesting point is that I get contacted almost every week by residents particularly concerned about flooding. And it's interesting because they're never in my district. They reach out to me as a Green councillor because they see us as having solutions. So these are almost always people who live on the peninsula and they've spoken to their councillor, and then they go to a Green councillor. So they are looking to us for solutions. And really, when I say, what do you want me to do, they really just say, listen to my problem, actually.
There's South East Climate Alliance have got a conference in Brighton on the Saturday, the 3rd of February. And, maybe you want to talk there. I'm looking for speakers.
Thank you.
Yes, you really wanted another job, didn't you? Yes, Duncan.
Yeah, Sam and I were having a chat earlier, and something that we were interested in exploring with both of you is how can we reach a younger electoral group demographic in Chichester and Bognor area and get them motivated. Obviously the voting age is 18. There'll be a lot of school kids who'll be able to vote in the next election. So I'm just wondering if that's an area that you have any thoughts about increasing our profile with.
Yeah, I think that's something that we need to look at over the next year. We have previously been to the Chichester University Green Fairs. I think hopefully what we can do is go out on the streets a bit more and talk to people. We can also see whether we can get into the schools. At the last general election, we did do a hustings in the Littlehampton school, which was really good because we were able to speak to all the pupils there and explain what our policies were. And also at the South East Greens conference recently, they've just elected 2 young people who are really looking at trying to engage the younger voter in our area. So hopefully we'll see some work coming from them as well. And that might give a younger profile in the local Green Party, because I think that's what you need, isn't it? They need to be able to look at the party and think there is somebody a bit like me that I can relate to. So that would be another useful way forwards. But it's definitely be something we'd like to work on.
It's a really good question. I think the answer might be partly related to your question, Georgie. I think the answer could be a general election. It's difficult to engage with young people about district council or county council, even if a lot of the work they do does directly relate to them. Whereas a general election will have a much higher profile, and that is maybe the opportunity to engage with young people. And actually that does fit in as well with our long campaign when we start to talk to people about county council as well. So I would say the more that we can do for the general election, the more we'll engage with these other groups, and the better it'll set us up for the long term for other seats.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes, Sam.
I think there's a good chance that anybody who's, obviously I'm Chichester based, but anybody in Chichester who's kind of thinking green is going to automatically start thinking about lending their vote to the Green Party. Sorry, if you're looking, I'm not sure how to word this properly. If you're going out into the community in Chichester and you're telling people you're the Green candidate, they're automatically going to assume that you're going to have good green policies. That's what they're going to be expecting from you. I think my question is badly worded, but I'm kind of looking, is there anything else that you guys are kind of focusing on at the moment and thinking about? Any other policies that are away from the environment? I know we're preaching to the choir here, but any stuff that's not related to the environment that we can sort of sell to people in Chichester, in Littlehampton and Bognor Regis? Obviously, I work in the NHS, so I work in primary care, I work in a GP surgery, and as a result, the most common issue that people come in and complain about with us is lack of appointments and waiting times, and when I'm referring people through to secondary services, and the fact that I'm now referring people for suspected breast cancer that 2 years ago they'd wait for 2 weeks, they're now waiting for 8 weeks before they're being seen. I'm doing the same thing when I'm referring people for pancreatic cancer, which is notoriously lately caught, and then we're saying again 2 weeks, and it's even longer. So that's something that if you guys came to me, that I'd be sort of pressing on. But I'm wondering if there's something specifically that you're sort of aiming at Chichester and Bognor Regis to try and sort of say, beyond just being a Green candidate and yes, having the better Green policies, I'm also thinking about all the other facets of politics and what I can do for you.
Yeah, I think it was very sad actually. I recently had a briefing as a councillor about what were the top health issues in Arun, and it turns out that one of the biggest issues is mental health among people who are under 25, and it's really sad to see that. And I can't help feeling it might partly come because there's not enough funding for schools in West Sussex. We've had a really low level of funding. The schools are not able to deliver what other areas can. So that's one area I'd look at. The NHS is something that needs to be really, it's being demolished in front of us basically, as far as I can see. So I would be definitely fighting to try and preserve it. And it's a real challenge because the funding has to be really focused back on the NHS so you can deliver what you were delivering, even as you say, 2 years ago. But that is a really big challenge because so much has been diverted. But it's obviously something that I would be highlighting amongst everybody to say we have to do something. And I think actually dentists is something people can relate to as a really simple thing because people understand they can't find a dentist for an appointment. They can't then get treatment. And that's something that's affecting young people. So it's a bit of a simpler message because, for example, breast cancer happens to a few people, but dentistry happens to everybody. So it's an easier way of understanding what's happening to the NHS. So it's basically what's happened to dentistry is happening to the NHS. So if you explain that to people, they can understand and they can see there's a real reason why they shouldn't be voting Tory, because Tories are completely demolishing what we've got. So we almost need to maybe appeal to their, almost like a saviour thing. You've got to vote for anything but Tory, and preferably us, because that's what you can do to fight for your future in this world. So, and one thing I didn't mention earlier is we talk about taxes and spending, but what we've actually seen with this government is taxes diverting a lot of the money and spending a bit. Because really that's where a lot of the money's gone. It's not that we've dropped the income from taxes, it's that more of it has gone amiss. And that's something we really need to look at as well, is proper procurement and audit processes so that money that is given to government by us, the taxpayers, is paid for what we want, which is a good NHS service and good schools for children. And even the universities now are saying they're going to struggle. So, you know, everything seems to be collapsing at the moment, and we need to put our house back in order. Yes. Thank you.
Good, very good answer, Carol. There are Green Party policies which are fantastically popular in the country, including nationalisation of utilities, and of course we're all thinking of the water utilities, and also universal basic income, which is a fantastic policy. However, we are the Green Party, and I think that's what people expect to be able to talk to us about. That's certainly where I'm most confident in talking about policy. So we also have to be realistic that unless Greens are part of a government, we can't deliver on these fantastic policies such as universal basic income and nationalisation of utilities. So people will listen to us when we talk about the environment, and I think we're on less firm ground when we talk about other things that we can't deliver. It sounds a little bit like promises, but I'm sure they would agree with, for example, Green Party support for the NHS.
Thanks.
Do we have any more questions? In that case, I would like to thank both of you. I think you've given some excellent answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We should all have our voting systems in our inboxes. Please vote. As you can see, we only have one candidate for each constituency, but you do have the option to, is it Ron or Ron?
Reopen nominations.
Reopen nominations. So you do have an alternative, but I hope that you will agree that we have got two very good candidates here and that you will vote for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Faye.
I think that's us done. So
Yeah.
thank you everyone, it's been awesome and you guys are brilliant. That was really very excellent.
Thank you, Faye, as well.
Yeah.